You ever have one of those moments where someone crosses a line so badly that you just sit there, staring at your phone, trying to process if what you're reading is even real? Yeah, that's exactly where I was the night my best friend called me sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She's not the kind of girl who cries easily. She's smart, funny, works hard, and honestly trusts people a little too much. And that's what got her into this mess. She'd met this guy online, some charming, smooth-talking idiot who made her feel seen. You know the type. Always saying the right thing, pretending to listen, making her laugh like she was the only person in the world. And for a while, I thought maybe this one wasn't like the rest. Until one night she told me he'd been asking for pictures. Not just cute selfies. The kind that no one ever expects to see the light of day. I told her to be careful, that sending something that personal could backfire. But she trusted him. He said all the right things. You can trust me. It's just for me. I'd never hurt you. Classic manipulation 101. And then, just like that, he flipped. When she started noticing some red flags and backed out like suddenly he was getting controlling. Jealous, kind of creepy, he turned around and threatened to leak those pictures. Told her if she didn't keep talking to him or didn't make it up to him, he'd post them online for the world to see. That's when she called me. And here's the thing what that creep didn't know. What he couldn't have possibly imagined was that I'm an attorney. And not just any attorney. I specialize in cases involving harassment and online crimes. I deal with predators like him for a living. He thought he picked some random sweet girl he could manipulate. But what he actually did was declare war on the wrong damn woman's best friend Dotso. While my friend was still crying on the phone, shaking and terrified, I told her one thing. You're not gonna lose sleep over this guy. I promise you. I'm gonna make sure he regrets even typing your name. She didn't believe me at first, thought I was just trying to make her feel better. But when I'm angry, I'm surgical. I don't scream, I don't cry, I build cases. And in that moment, I decided I wasn't just going to stop him from hurting her. I was going to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone ever again. I started small. I asked her to send me everything, every message, every picture, every detail she remembered. She didn't know much about him, just his first name, a vague idea of where he worked, and the fact that he lived in another country. But the guy wasn't exactly a genius at covering his tracks. He'd sent her a few selfies, one of them in a polo shirt with a company logo. Rookie mistake. That was all I needed to start pulling threads. See, most people underestimate how easy it is to connect online crumbs. A TikTok handle can lead to an Instagram username, which can link to a LinkedIn profile, which can lead you straight to someone's employer. Within an hour, I had him. The TikTok handle he used matched one of the usernames in her messages. The face matched to same haircut, same smug expression. From there, I found his Instagram, where he'd posted a picture of his motorcycle. And guess what? License plate showing. That was my golden ticket. With that plate number, I could trace him to his city, even his street. Oh, and that company logo on his shirt? Yeah, that matched the LinkedIn profile I found, complete with his full name, job title, and a smiling team photo. He looked like the kind of guy who thought he was untouchable. The kind who posts motivational quotes like real men respect women, while secretly being the scum of the earth. Now, a lot of people in my position would have stopped there. Maybe just warned him. But me? No. He threatened my friend. He scared her, humiliated her, and made her feel powerless. And that kind of trauma doesn't go away. So I decided to make sure he felt that exact same helplessness. I gathered everything, screenshots of his threats, the chat logs showing his username, the picture of him in his work polo, and the one with the license plate. I even found a clip of him bragging about his workplace on TikTok. He mentioned something about his office, which meant he was sending those disgusting messages from company property. Jackpot.next. I drafted an email, calm, professional, cold enough to send chills down anyone's spine. I addressed it to his company's CEO, VP of HR, Operations Manager, and PR Head. The subject line? Urgent legal and ethical matter regarding employee misconduct? Inside that email, I attached everything. Screenshots of his threats to release private photos, snippets of their chat showing his username next to the same pictures he'd posted publicly, evidence of him discussing workplace incidents, bragging about having sex with an ex in the office, and even planning to do it again. I also attached the image where his work laptop screen was visible with his entire Outlook calendar and internal company data. In short, I built a bulletproof case showing that this man was not only a predator, but a massive liability to their company. And then, just for good measure, I told them that I'd be forwarding all of this to local law enforcement. And since my friend is a US citizen and he'd mentioned traveling to the States for work soon, I'd also be sending everything to the FBI. That's the moment I hit send. One click. That's all it took to turn his world upside down. Chad said, the moment I hit send. I felt this weird mix of adrenaline and the kind of serenity you get after you've done something inevitable, like finally locking a door you should have locked years ago. Knowing the house is safe. I watched the email leave my outbox and I waited. Not because I thought anything dramatic would happen in the next 5 minutes, but because I knew the dominoes had been set. And once you tip the first one, the rest tumble on their own schedule. Within a few hours, my phone started buzzing with more frequency than it had in months. Messages from my friend that were half relief and half disbelief. An automatic reply from one of his corporate addresses confirming receipt. And then something that made my lips curl into a small, private smile. An HR email asking for more information and offering a time to speak. That was the sound of a machine that hated scandal waking up. The company responded like most companies do when their brand is at risk, quietly but promptly. Because reputation management is the closest thing big firms have to panic. They put internal flags on the account. They pulled his access. And they started a confidential inquiry. I wasn't naive. I knew HR teams will protect themselves first. But by the time they did their job, the evidence I'd sent was already a public relations time bomb that couldn't simply be buried. Meanwhile, he went from arrogant to frantic in a matter of texts. Who the hell is this? He wrote to my friend, trying to conjure bravado. If you do anything, I'll post everything. He switched to pleading when nobody danced to his tune. Please don't do this. I can't lose my job. Please don't ruin me. I saved every single message. His calls to her went unanswered. Then to mutual acquaintances who started responding with that awkward, thinly veiled I don't know him energy you get when people smell trouble and want to be as far away as possible. He called me a few times, once, twice. A voicemail of apologies and threats both mixed into the same breath. Like a man who didn't know which role he wanted to play. I didn't pick up. Let him listen to his own voice stammering. Let him hear how pathetic he sounded. That in itself is a form of accountability. Over the next 48 hours, the effect widened because career people talk to career people. And when a story smells like liability, the herd scatters fast. An operations manager I hadn't expected to reach out actually did. A terse, professional email asking for clarification and attaching a non-disclosure acknowledgement from me. To sign, a clear sign the company was taking this seriously. I gave them what they needed, offered to cooperate, and hinted that if they sent him on a business trip to the United States, they should think twice. Not a threat, just a clear statement of fact. If he boarded a plane to U.S. soil, he'd be walking right into federal jurisdiction for threats against a U.S. citizen. And that line I dropped, the FBI line, is not just drama. When something crosses international lines and involves extortion or threats, that's the kind of language that makes corporate counsel call their separate counsel. You could see it in the way the communication escalated. They asked for more details, for timestamps, for copies of everything. By doing that, they were building their own internal packet. And I knew what that packet often becomes: cause for suspension, cause for termination, cause for an official report to local law enforcement. In the meantime, his arrogance got replaced with paranoid attempts to cover tracks. He messaged my friend from burner accounts. He deleted posts. He told people his account was hacked. Classic. But deleting is theater. Once something has been archived, screenshots, shares, caches, the delete button doesn't matter. He tried to reach HR through a colleague with an I can explain message. The sort of message that expects sympathy and gets none when the pile of evidence is obvious. And then his girlfriend, Cassandra, started to wobble in the way people do when they realize they've placed their bets on a mirage. She texted him, "What's happening? Why are you freaking out?" He wrote back with a mixture of anger and pleading. She asked for receipts. She asked for proof. When little inconsistencies in his story began to show up, bank transfers, he couldn't explain convincingly dates and locations that didn't match. She started to queue. The fairy tale he'd painted for her was more smoke than substance. For someone like Cassandra, who seemed to thrive on the fantasy of being swept off her feet by a man living beyond his means, the reality of shaken credit, an uncertain job status, and scandal is a cold bucket of water. Within a week, she had quietly removed several photos of them together, and within 2, mutual friends reported that she had stopped answering his calls. That was the sound of the fantasy deflating. It was almost too easy to watch, not because I enjoy watching people suffer, but because his choices had consequences that were now visible and undeniable. On the legal side, local law enforcement took the complaints seriously when I called and spoke with them, calmly laying out the timeline and providing the same attachments I'd sent to the company. Threat screenshots. His username correlated to public posts. The motorcycle plate tied to a physical address in his city, and cache pictures where he displayed his workplace and screens with proprietary content. They opened an investigation. Not every case results in an immediate arrest. Law enforcement runs on evidence, on jurisdiction, and on the cadence of their caseload. But opening a file is the step that turns individual wrongdoing into something the state can weigh. And because I'd done my job thoroughly, timestamps, metadata nodes, cross-platform connections, the file had teeth. On top of that, I called a contact in immigration enforcement. I have a few friends in different agencies. Years of practice create a small network, not to threaten, but to give them a heads up that a foreign national with documented threats against a U.S. citizen had indicated travel plans. That kind of tip, offered with documentation, often results in an extra level of scrutiny if they decide to travel. It's not theatrics. It's the adult version of don't let the fox near the henhouse. He tried to play brave for a little while. Posting vague, defiant status updates about being targeted and apologizing to no one in particular. But when the company suspended him pending investigation, and HR told him not to step foot on company property, his bravado cracked into panic. His bank cards started getting declined in small, humiliating moments. The Amazon subscription he forgot was in autopay. The car service he relied on, because the joint accounts had been frozen after I filed papers. With my attorney requesting emergency relief, not all my tools were pure legal hammers. Some were administrative levers, some were social, and some were the kind of granular, tedious things that add up to the tangible reality of consequences. He had money problems, job problems, and the only person he thought might save him, Cassandra, was already backing away. In that vacuum, desperation grows loud and ugly. He started showing up at places he believed I might be connected to, leaving voicemails from my friend that ranged from tearful apologies to incoherent threats. I recorded and saved everything. Evidence is a file, not a feeling. And your feelings only matter in court if they're supported by facts. As his world constricted, he misjudged where the pressure point would be and made another mistake. He reached out to one of the people who had been sent my email at work, not to deny, but to beg. That email went straight to the general counsel, who asked his HR to expedite their internal review. Within days, he received a formal notice, administrative leave pending investigation. The notice was short and clinical, but it carried with it the kind of social death most men like him can't get over. People whisper. People withdraw invites. People who once treated him as a colleague began to avoid eye contact. His phone records showed frantic calls to friends and to family who now hesitated to answer. And of course, local gossip moved faster than any formal process. By the time the preliminary hearing rolled around, his reputation, the core of the life he'd been so carefully curating, was cracked beyond repair. Meanwhile, my friend started to sleep again. She texted me in the middle of the night a few days later. I had a dream I could breathe. No lawyer should expect to be thanked for doing their job, but that message felt like acknowledgement from someone who had been returned a piece of safety. She began slowly putting her life back together, deleting accounts, changing numbers, and speaking to a counselor to process the violation that had nothing to do with her morality and everything to do with his choices. Watching her reclaim agency was the point of all of this. It wasn't about ego. It was about restoring a human being to a space where she felt safe. He, on the other hand, kept flailing, fired, alone, humiliated. The man who once sat comfortably in meetings and smiled for company cameras now sat in dingy diner booths, scrolling his credit balance with a look of someone who had just learned what poverty tastes like emotionally. Friends stopped sharing his posts. His mother called, bewildered and ashamed, to ask what had happened. I answered once, briefly, when she asked if there was any way her son could make amends. I told her the truth. Amends are possible only when the person facing the harm is willing to accept them, and that requires contrition that isn't performative. Words without action get you sympathy for 2 minutes and nothing more. In the months that followed, I watched the slow unravel of a man who had treated another person as an object and learned to his cost that objects have a way of fighting back, legally and socially. He tried to find work under different names, but references were burned. Potential employers did their due diligence. Even the small pleasures he once used to impress, the dinner reservations, the flashy accessories, became unaffordable, and even if he could afford them, no one wanted to be seen with the man who'd weaponized someone else's privacy for thrills. And yet, as his world shrank, mine widened. My friend volunteered with a local support group. That helped people who'd had intimate images weaponized against them. And I started doing pro bono consultations for survivors who couldn't afford legal help. My consultancy became more than a business. It was a network, a safe place, and a small form of reparation for people who'd been silenced. I transformed the anger and the violation into action. Workshops on digital safety, legal clinics on how to protect privacy, and quiet one-on-one sessions with people who were frightened and alone. The pleasure of seeing survivors move from fear to control is quietly addictive in the best possible way. Every time someone told me they'd slept through the night again. Every time a client walked away from a workshop feeling less ashamed and more practical. I felt like we had nudged the scale a little back toward justice. So yes, he lost his job. His mistress left. His accounts were constrained. And his social circle evaporated. Those are outcomes many would call just desserts. But the real triumph was watching a woman who had been reduced to fear regain her voice, walk into our clinic with shoulders that still trembled, and leave months later ready to date again, ready to laugh, ready to build, because in the end, that's the kind of life we take back from people who tried to destroy others for sport.